and they're contrary to the sign bylaw as well. So in dealing with the former signs, it was thought that we would deal with the second signs as well. So we're dealing with those. There's not too many out there, as I understand, at this particular point. So bylaw has started an initiative to deal with those signs.
But so you say they're contrary, and I'm thinking about the support the downtown core signs, because they just appeared a week ago or 2 weeks ago, and I guess it's somebody in town that's putting a push on that. So when you say they have to be removed, do you mean they have to be removed from public property?
And yeah, so if any are on public property, I just observed, I haven't seen too many of the signs out there. Right now, I think most of them are on private property.
So let's talk about the ones on private property. Are they going to be forced to take them down?
Yeah, where they're located, as I understand it, they're contrary to the sign bylaw, but the senior municipal law enforcement officer, there is some flexibility with respect to the signs in terms of how they are placed. And so people that have chosen to have those signs on their property will be given some options in terms of where they place them. It's just that they can't be sticking in the ground in the front yard of
But how do you rationalize for the past year and a half that we've had these hydro things up and nobody, I mean, and I think they've got the right to put them up, there's nothing wrong with them. But all of a sudden they're okay, and now these things pop up in a week and we're telling them to take them down. How do we rationalize that?
So if I may, Mr. Chair, just with respect to the heat hydro public signs, there was a concern that the town's action in having those signs removed could be misconstrued as being the town taking an action against a particular point of view with respect to the issue.
But doesn't that hold true on the support the downtown core? I mean, for sauce for the goose is sauce for the gander. I mean, I just don't understand it, and I didn't, first of all, I didn't remember council giving directions, but as you say, that they didn't, and now staff has taken it upon themselves. I mean, where have they been for the last year? And I have no quarrel with those hydro signs. I think they had every right to put them up and voice their opinion.
Mayor Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to the CAO. Mr. CAO, so I understand that these signs, the hydro signs, for example, is it our staff who's picking these up and returning them to people?
If I may, Mr. Chair, no, Your Worship, the town staff are dealing with the signs on public property. So the signs that are on private property, the property owner is being asked to return those signs.
But the signs that are on public property, it's town staff that are going to pick these signs up and return them to the...
We're just bringing them to town hall.
Okay. And during the election, if you don't pick your signs up or they're in a space they're not supposed to be, those signs are normally picked up and they're discarded in the garbage. And usually, if you don't pick your sign up by a certain time after the campaign, there's a fine for that. Is the same rules going to stand here?
Mr. Chair, so I'm not 100% familiar with the provisions of the sign bylaws as it pertains to election signs. We do collect them, we bring them here. We ask the candidate or the representatives to come and pick up their signs at town hall. If they're not picked up, then we dispose of them. Yet there are provisions after the election for the signs to be picked up by the candidates and whatnot. I'm not familiar with the provisions with respect to if a candidate doesn't pick up the signs. I think we do a little bit of outreach and we contact the candidate and say, we're past the deadline, could you go please pick up your signs? I'd have to consult with the bylaw department to find out specifically with respect to what the provisions are of the sign bylaw. I'm just not up to speed on that.
Councillor Stockwell.
I think
Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have the same concerns as Councillor Stockwell, and I think that we need to have, I've asked that it go on the committee whole agenda next time round for discussion, because I really think this is an important point. I realize we don't want signs to be all over the place all the time, but I think because that was for the good of the town, and I think the other, we're talking about would support the downtown is for the good of the town. It's residents making a decision or showing their support for something, and I think we need to look at these case by case, and I've got it coming up that I've asked to be put on the agenda for committee of the whole.
Councillor Stockwell. Oh, you're asking, you had.
No, I'll yield to the deputy mayor.
Thank you.
Sorry, Deputy Mayor, right.
I was just going to say I do agree with Councillor Smith that we should be discussing it at a different meeting. It's not on this agenda. We don't have our bylaw here to address it. And I think that all sides need to be considered when they are at the table to explain it, because as much as we have signs that say that they support it, I would expect there will be signs that say we don't support it. So I think it will turn into something bigger, and I think that the bylaw department needs to consider all of that.
Well, okay, now, Mr. Chairman, I want to make clear that I'm opposed to our staff going out and harassing citizens who have signs on their private property voicing their concerns about an issue, as they did not bother the ones on the hydro issue. Again, I say, and I was in favor of that, don't bother them, they got the right to put them up there. But so has the other people. So maybe this could be a question to the CAO. Can I be assured that we'll cease and desist bothering citizens with these signs on their private property until council gets an opportunity to deal with this further? Is that a reasonable thing to understand?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through to the councillor. I'll go down to bylaw and I'll ask what the status of the enforcement is. I think that the enforcement has already started, so I'll just inquire with respect to where we were at. I think the focus was on the hydro signs first, and if committee is requesting that the enforcement of the downtown support signs be held in abeyance until council has an opportunity to discuss it at committee of the whole, certainly I could take that direction.
I would move such a motion, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Bray.
Well, I think just a comment, my sign was removed while I was out of town, so bylaw is definitely canvassing the neighborhoods, because I got a call to say that a couple of signs were. I just, if we're going to do that, perhaps we could remind people what part of the property is theirs, because I imagine they're measuring the 10 feet in, the 20 feet in, or whatever that is. But I certainly thought mine was on private property. Obviously it wasn't, it was removed, so I just like to remind people what it is so that they can proactively put their sign where they want it to be.
Councillor
Question
Smith.
to the councillor, which sign is it they had removed? Is it support downtown, or is it the hydro sign that they took from your property?
From my property, through the chair, the sign that was removed was Keep Hydro Public. And I believe that there's an official collection scheduled for August the 27th at the community celebration.
Councillor Stockwell, before you entertain your motion, is it okay if the chair make a few comments?
You're the chair.
Okay, thank you. I would, we're talking about private property, but the signs that were on public property were ignored for a year. I don't know what happened here. I've talked to bylaw on a number of occasions, and they have indicated to me that because of their staffing restraints, they generally do not take staff action, and it's generally their action is generated from a complaint from the public. I have not been made aware of any complaint from the public. Matter of fact, the CAO has assured me that this was initiated as a staff action. I have some real concern with that, because I know there has been some concern raised over the signing. So I certainly concur with Councillor Stockwell that the direction to our CAO and staff should be that no further action be taken until such time as we've had an opportunity to discuss it and decide what we're going to do moving forward.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to Councillor Bray's comment, shortly after the decision of Council in July with respect to the options for the future of Wasaga distribution, I was in conversation with one of the organizers of the distribution of the signs, and they indicated to me that the group had some volunteers that were going around collecting signs. And this was well before the town initiated any action, so this would have been in July. And in fact, I did get a couple of phone calls from residents wondering what happened to their sign in front of their home. And my only response was that I knew that there were volunteers going around collecting signs. So I just wanted to make that comment because I'm not sure how active that volunteer group is at the current time. Maybe they've suspended their operations given the call for collection of the signs, but I just wanted to make that point just so that you didn't jump to the conclusion that perhaps it was town staff. It may have been town staff, but it may have been volunteers as well. I just don't know.
Thank you.
Just one more comment, if I may. I believe on one of the Facebook postings, false news, is that they were encouraged to keep their signs and put them up during the election. And I remember that posting on Facebook very clearly, that people should keep them and put them up during the election as a statement. And that's why we need to have this discussion. While we're waiting, Mr. Chair, I had something else to pull from the consent items as well. Councillor Stockwell, I think, jumped ahead a bit there.
Okay, well, we'll deal with this motion in a minute.
Okay, thank you.
Resolved that the community service section moved by Councillor Stockwell and seconded by Councillor Smith. Resolved that the community service section of coordinating recommend that staff do not remove downtown master plan signage from private property until further discussion is held and direction from council is provided. I would just like to comment, in my comments I had suggested that it be both public and private property. So I would ask for that amendment.
I would struggle to pass a bylaw that says, let's break our own bylaw, and I think that by doing that, we're saying break our own bylaw.
But we were breaking our own bylaw for 1 year.
It's
so.
different to pass a motion saying, let's break the bylaw,
No.
in my opinion.
If I may, Mr. Chair, I understand where you're coming from. However, I have no issue with people having a sign on their own property. I think we can get it. I think that can become very messy, and there's no doubt it will.
Yep.
I'll bet coffee for the whole crew here on that. And so I'm not sure where I even sit on that at this point. However, I would struggle with it being on public property because we could have everyone and their brother now putting a sign up, you know, protect the whales or, you know, whatever it might be on public property. There's no doubt there was a, you know, in the past that the bylaw was being broken, wasn't being enforced for whatever reason, who knows. And quite frankly, it's a done deal now, it's finished, so who cares? Let's move on. But I could not support anybody just being able to put a sign out on public property. I understand where you're coming from on that, and I respect that, Mr. Chair, but boy, oh boy, we'll become an ugly town in a hurry if we let anyone and their brother put signs up on public property.
I don't disagree with that. I would just ask the CAO that in knowing that that is our bylaw, that our tolerance should be 0, and that public. Yes, ma'am.
Sorry, I just want to clarify, I did say protect the whales. I want to clarify that I believe in protecting the whales.
You gotta
So
get that away.
when the people here read Facebook, they'll know what I've said. Thank you.
Okay.
With the question- with the question having been read, we'll call for the vote. Councillor Belanger?
And, oh, you were the chair
Or,
first.
sorry, wrong, yes. Deputy Mayor Byfolchi?
Sorry, can I just get clarification? So it's just the downtown signs at this point? Okay, in favor.
Councillor Bray?
In favor.
Councillor Ego?
In favor.
Councillor Smith?
In favor.
Mayor Smith?
In favor.
Councillor Stockwell?
Favor.
Councillor Belanger?
In favor.
The vote is 7 in favor and 0 opposed. The motion is carried.
Okay, Councillor Smith, I believe you indicated that you had an item that was missed being pulled.
Yes, sorry, it's in the Recreation Events and Facilities Department report, and I see Mr. Roos is here. I have two,
Usually.
You're just gonna tell me.
I know, but we didn't. Oh,
There's a council format that we'll just.
oh, okay,
I think we should follow.
oh, I'm sorry, okay, sorry.
Okay, my apologies.
I'll wait for the,
Okay, sorry, what item was it?
The
called?
recreation,
Was there a specific?
Recreation Events and Facilities report, Mr. Roos.
Okay, very good. So resolved that the community service section of coordinated committee does hereby receive the August 17th, 2017 consent agenda items
Oh, thank you.
3, 4 through 3, 4, 3, and that the recommendations contained therein be adopted as amended. And that is C1 recreation.
The question having been read, we'll call for the vote. Deputy Mayor Byfolchi?
In favor.
Councillor Bray?
In favor.
Councillor Ego?
in favor.
Councillor Smith?
In favor.
Mayor Smith?
In favor.
Councillor Belanger? Or sorry, Councillor Stockwell?
Favor.
Chair Belanger?
In favor.
The vote is 7 in favor and 0 opposed. The motion is carried.
Okay, would you like to speak to that?
Thank you. I just have a question, is why the events update is included in the Recreation Department report. That's the first thing that I questioned. I don't see a separate events, and I know some of these are through Parks and Rec, but there's also others that are through the Special Events Department, not so pro volleyball, 4th series, and then the upcoming events. So I was just wondering why they were part of the recreation report and not special events report, some of those that need to be pulled. So is there a reason they're put together?
Through the chair, Councillor, in my understanding, our Recreation Events and Facilities Department has an update to council at CSC that would include all of the divisions of the department. And then beyond that, there are specific reports that would be submitted either here or sometimes to the Beachfront Management Board, depending on where the event is taking place. But this is only an update of highlights of the month of July of all the divisions in my department.
Thank you.
And that's where events is now combined with recreation and facilities.
So, Mr. CAO, if I may, Mr. Chair, is this the way we would be seeing reports? Does Mrs. Weber, does she report through recreation now, or how does that work?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, in this particular situation, the council has not considered the Beachfront Management Board minutes, which are normally brought forward to committee of the whole. And those minutes typically have the updates on the various events and whatnot. So, it was felt in this particular case that this report would have that information. With respect to the reporting relationship on events, that hasn't changed. It's still for events, for approvals and whatnot. It still goes to, for beachfront area, it still goes to the Beachfront Management Board. This report is just for information so that all of council is informed, because they would not have, in theory, otherwise been informed, because you haven't had a chance to consider the minutes.
Well, further to that, I have a question, and I don't, and that's why I wanted Mrs. Weber expected is, I don't see any updates on where we stand with the ticket sales from the Electric Elements. And we haven't had a further follow-up. We were told to go back and staff was told to go and negotiate or find out where that, tell them what council had decided they should be paying. And we have not seen an update on that report.
Yes. Yes. Go ahead.
Chair, Councillor Smith. It's my understanding that we have reported through the Tourism and Events Advisory Committee on that discussion, but for your information specifically, in and about $10,000 was collected based on the ticket sales agreement that we had with the Electric Elements, so that money has been collected. I think we're within $500 based on a final discussion of rental equipment. So the vast majority of that expected revenue was collected.
That's fine.
Yeah.
I guess, Councillor
Well,
Stubb.
no, I think I understand what Councillor Smith's saying. My recollection is the matter came to us. We had some concerns about amounts.
Yes.
And we referred it back for additional information. So when that additional information is gathered, there should be a report back to council advising us the final situation that staff has negotiated with the promoter. And I was waiting to see that. I was interested in seeing it.
Okay, I would make a comment that I agree with you, and I think that I would still like to see that and the recollection of the information that was first presented and what had changed since then. Because I believe there were some questions as to whether or not the amounts reflected what we believed were correct.
This may predate June 12th when I came on board, but I do remember that there was a review of this discussion and it came forward that we had suspended something, so I think I'm responsible to make sure that report happens.
Need a motion? No. Okay.
Thank you.
Any further comments or questions? Okay, resolved that the Community Service Section of Coordinating Committee does hereby receive the Recreation Events and Facilities Department report, monthly activity report as information.
The question having been read, we'll call for the vote. Deputy Mayor Byfolchi?
In favor?
Councillor Bray?
In favor?
Councillor Eagle?
In favor.
Councillor Smith?
In favor.
Mayor Smith?
In favor?
Councillor Stockwell?
Favor.
Chair Belanger?
In favor.
The vote is 7 in favor and 0 opposed. The motion is carried.
I guess the next is still another item. What's this? That's the tax. Yeah, but there was one other, it's on the page. Okay. Is that ahead of it? The next item was the 3.2 departmental accounts. Mr. Stockton.
Mr. Chair, through you, when I was reviewing this, there's a considerable amount of checks being cut for the Canada Day event. And the Canada Day event was a very highly successful event. And you recall leading up to the event, we were concerned about the financing of the whole thing. And I think that I would like to request that at the staff's, I was going to say leisure, but that's not the word, when staff finds the time, if they could bring forward a final report on the cost of the event, so that we would have an understanding as to what these things cost. And I say that as a member of council. I also say that as a member of the beach management board, because you know, the event was a great event, but I know it cost a lot of money. And I'd like to see it broken down as to how much it did cost, so that it could be used as a benchmark for future events. And I think it's and it was highly successful. I don't knock it. It was good, but it did cost a lot of money. And I'd like to see the detailed report of the financing. So I make that request.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think the director is here, and certainly you can take that back and prepare a report for the next available.
Sir, yeah, good.
Thank you. Resolved that the departmental accounts for the month of July 2017 as reviewed by the Community Service Section of Coordinated Committee are hereby confirmed.
With the question having been read, we'll call for the vote. Deputy Mayor Recolchi?
In favor?
Councillor Bray?
In favor?
Councillor Eagle?
In favor.
Councillor Smith?
In favor.
Mayor Smith?
In favor?
Councillor Stockwell?
Favor.
Chair Belanger?
In favor.
The vote is 7 in favor and 0 opposed. The motion is carried.
Okay, and the last item was the Wasaga Beach Provincial Park, Park Beach Management Secondary Plan, and that was pulled by Councillor Brady.
I don't know that I pulled it, I just, we were receiving it for information, but it wasn't attached, so I haven't had time to review it. So we're reviewing it for information, which is fine, but I just wanted to make note that I didn't actually see it. So
Thank
were
you,
there
Mr.
any
Chair.
changes to the final approved draft from
There
the
were
one before that we
changes.
saw it? Like, that's what
I
was
made
fine.
a hard copy for members of council and put it in the council boardroom. It's a 62-page document, so I'm happy to forward it electronically and make a copy if you'd like to see a full copy.
Were there significant changes or nothing?
I think there was certainly changes to, I think, reflect the town's interest in terms of maintenance, about recreation. Did it go as far as the town wanted? Probably not. I think there were words like tourism aren't included in the plan, at least what we can see. Lots of terminology like recreation and recreational uses and that kind of thing. So there's a recognition of the balance between recreational uses and environmental uses, but I think the town was looking to really emphasize the tourism part. So the pictures on the cover have changed to show some beach activity as opposed to natural scenes. So I'll leave it up to the individual reader to see if they've noticed any other differences. That's kind of a high level summary.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Mayor Smith?
So, I guess just a procedural question through you, Mr. Chair, to the Deputy Clerk and or the CAO. It does indicate here that we're receiving it for information, but to Councillor Bray's point, it's not here to receive. So should this be stricken from this agenda and placed maybe on the next one once Council's been able to see it, actually received it and read it? Just for clarity.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Typically with these large documents, we'll put a little note to say that the document is in the council boardroom or whatnot for viewing, because it is a large volume document. That's what we've done in the past. I don't know if on the agenda it says that typically, so that we try to leave it available for members of council to view.
And I'm just trying not to be technical, although I guess it is technical, that if we're going to agree that we've received it for information and we haven't received it yet, or some of us haven't received it yet, in future that could be problematic, perhaps. So maybe we should be striking it from this and adding it to the next one, or amending it.
Let me just
Notice.
If I may, Mr. Chair, the motion pertains to the correspondence. It says receive the correspondence, and that's what's in your agenda. So the cover memo, the
Okay.
plan is not referenced in the motion.
Thank you.
Okay, I guess I have a comment as chair, is just, are we saying that after we do have the opportunity to read this in its entirety, that we would like this put on a future agenda, as future business, to have a discussion? Like we're just receiving for information right now.
Done deal.
It's done.
Okay, so we're good?
Done deal.
Okay. Oh yeah, I gotta read this one, sorry. Resolved that the Community Service Section of Coordinated Committee received the Wasaga Beach Provincial Park Beach Management Secondary Plan correspondence for information.
With the question having been read, we'll call for the vote. Deputy Mayor Fulci?
In favor?
Councillor Bray?
Favor?
Councillor Eagle?
In favor?
Councillor Smith?
In favor.
Mayor Smith?
In favor.
Councillor Stockwell?
Favor.
Chair Belanger?
In favor.
The vote is 7 in favor and 0 opposed. The motion is carried.
Recess.
We will now recess for 10 minutes, okay for everyone?
Recess.
5 minutes.
Okay, we'll call this meeting back to order. I do have a disclosure of pecuniary interest for myself, check number 021462 for $757.10 as it pertains to a family member. I'll be voting on all other matters. And with that, we have a presentation by Mr. Tulloch from CC Tatum. Kevin's here as well. If you wanted to go ahead.
Excellent, thank you, Madam. So what I'd like to present today, and if we can get the light, might use it off. So I believe the information package that had been supplied to you is a version of the slides that will be presented at the second Public Information Center, which is to be scheduled most likely mid-September. So what I've done is simply taken that information and made it into a little bit more user-friendly, presentation-friendly for purposes of this presentation. But the information, what I will present is similar to the information that will be presented to the public and what you've been circulated already. So perhaps just to give you some quick background. So the 2012 Transportation Study Update completed for the town identified the need to widen the section of Moseley Street from Beechwood to 45th to either 3 or 4 lanes. And then it further noted that east of 45th we have a 4-lane cross section, and then further east as it progresses through the town it'll be a 3-lane cross section. So the study that we are currently undertaking, the Class EA work, is really to focus on 2 elements. The first is to widen the road to provide increased capacity and hence meet our future transportation demands. And by that I mean vehicular demands, pedestrian and cyclist demands. And then to urbanize the road section, to eliminate the roadside ditches and effectively free up that boulevard space to better accommodate other road users within the corridor. So really the objectives of the Class EA to improve traffic operations through the Moseley Street corridor, eliminate the open roadside ditches, provide proper storm sewers, and provide opportunities to implement the active transportation measures as recommended in the town's active transportation plan. So going through the Class EA process, the purpose of that is really to identify different solutions to addressing these needs, identifying what potential impacts might result, what mitigating measures might be necessary to address those, identify the preferred solutions, and go through the Class EA process to document and record such and present such to the public, including opportunity for public input and comment. So the Class EA process is a formalized process. We are undertaking phases 1 through 4, and we are currently in the tail end of phase 3. Phase 4 will culminate with the environmental study report, which will again go on public record for their 30-day review period. Phase 5 is essentially the implementation, so that's the design and construction, and that will be undertaken at a later date subject to council approval and appropriate funding. So our responsibilities at this point is phases 1 through 4. So the study area, as I mentioned, extends from the roundabout to 45th Street. It's essentially 1 lane per direction with a paved shoulder in a rural cross section. The premise behind the study is largely traffic volumes. So in order to establish current volumes, we undertook traffic counts through a spell in June and July of 2016. So it encompassed a typical average summer weekday, and that's the end of June. The average we call the weekend, so the June weekend, and summer conditions as we got into July, and then the summer long weekend as well, given that we had a Canada Day weekend in there. So we were able to capture the variations through that period. And we did 2 count locations throughout. So this is just a quick snapshot of what we are looking at. These are daily volumes, and the red line is east of 58th Street. We had some mechanical problems, so there's a gap missing. And the blue line are traffic volumes west of 58th Street. So you can see that towards the east, they're slightly higher. But again, this is daily volumes. So for a 2-lane arterial road, similar to similar to Moseley Street, we would expect a daily capacity of about 15,000 vehicles a day. So that's this black line, this representation. So you can see in some particular days we are over that. This is the weekend, the end of June weekend, and then this is the Canada Day long weekend. Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So you can say definitely volumes peaked on the Canada Day to Saturday, slightly higher leading up to the previous weekend, but even during the week they are relatively high. And then from a traffic operations perspective, we'll often look at the busiest hours, recognizing that during the course of the remainder of the day, traffic is perhaps not so critical. So these are just hourly volumes. The blue lines represent the busiest hour in the morning, and the red lines represent the busiest hour in the evening. And you can see these are just our different count stations and different directions of traffic. Again, the red areas are highlighting the weekends. When we're looking at an hourly basis, essentially one lane of traffic will serve 800 vehicles an hour, generally speaking. So again, we are for the most part below this when we get to the west of 58. As we proceed east of 58, because of that, the influx of traffic, we're getting some traffic levels up to the road capacity. Okay, so from a traffic operations and assessment perspective, under average conditions, we're generally operating at or near capacity currently. And then summer volumes are somewhat greater, but I think the premise is that we are not designing the Wasaga Beach road system to accommodate those peak periods, much the same way that you don't design the shopping mall parking lot for the Christmas rush. But in the future, as we project forward, considering development growth within the town, we've assumed or we've concluded that the 2 lanes will give us sufficient capacity for the next 5 years. 3 lanes will serve the 5 to 10 year demands, recognizing you put that center turn lane in, it makes the left turns easier, so that frees up capacity in the remaining lanes. But really beyond the 10 years, you should be looking at a 4-lane road, given the projected travel demands. And this is comparable to what is currently east of 45th Street as well. From a roadside and area drainage perspective, so again, we've got a rural cross-section, we have open ditches, very limited urbanization, if any, and then there's a large channel along the north side, which is illustrated in the photo here, between 52nd and 54th Street. So as part of that urbanization, we'll try to eliminate many of these open ditches and replace them with buried storm sewers and curb and gutter. And then in conjunction with that, implementing any improvements that come out of the Bay Sands Development Class E as well, and that could possibly include a crossing at 67th Street. So as part of this design project, we'd have to incorporate whatever design and drainage improvements came out of that study. So if we look at the existing conditions in context of, well, what is the problem and what are we trying to solve? Moseley Street is an arterial road. It is intended to serve a higher volume of traffic. It is intended to serve traffic from one end of town to the other, and providing access for those outside of town to get into town. The shoulders are gravelly, or they're gravel or partially paved, and they're currently being used as cycle routes and or pedestrian corridors. Rights of way varies from 20 to 26 meters, and we'll see that in a future slide and the implications of such. And from a traffic perspective, we're operating at or near capacity on an average condition. When we project into the future, then we are going to need some additional road capacity to adequately accommodate the demands. And if not, that means that the demand simply goes somewhere else and increases volume somewhere else, or that demand just diminishes. We do want to provide an improved road surface because the road is starting to age. We do want to implement the urban cross-section to provide improved drainage, and that would also allow for opportunities for active transportation. So if we package that all up into our problem statement, basically the existing traffic and infrastructure needs are to be improved to accommodate future demands in accordance with town standards, in accordance with the recommendations coming out of the active transportation master plan, and also trying to improve the drainage through the corridor. So that's kind of the framework to the project. So as I mentioned, we are proceeding to the Public Information Center number 2, currently in phase 3 of the Class E8 process. So we had presented to the public initially, and at that point we were looking at options, general options to address that problem statement. And alternatives included doing nothing, reducing travel demands, so getting people out of their vehicles, potentially into other modes of travel, looking at alternative travel routes, looking at just localized improvements at the intersections, what can be done to increase capacity, and then options that looked at widening the road to either 3 or 4 lanes. And stemming from that assessment and the public consultation, only alternatives E and F, that is the widening of the road to 3 or 4 lanes, was deemed appropriate. And in conjunction with that, there would be the provision of the urban cross-section and hence traffic, sidewalks and cycling facilities. So we put that forward to the public, and we had requested their comments and their inputs, and we had put specifically 3 questions forward to them. Question 1 is, do you feel that Moseley Street should be widened from Beechwood to 45th to address future travel needs? If so, why? And you can see predominantly, in fact, all of them agreed that yes, a widening is necessary. So this is a summary of all the comments received for these questions. And the public identified the need to widen it to address traffic, the need to widen it to provide sidewalks, the need to provide the center turn lane to make turning easier, the need to accommodate tourist traffic, the need to accommodate bicyclists and other road users, and again recognizing that other portions of Moseley Street are 4 lanes as well. So there's definitely support for widening the road. With respect to the provision of bicycle lanes, again, in some cases it was mixed. It was put bicycle lanes in if you're doing 3 lanes. Cyclists should use shore lane as it's going to be safer. Focus should be on traffic, not on cyclists, or maybe on one side but not the other, whereas others are definitely in support of it. So there's a mixed consensus there, if you will, mixed support for it. And likewise, question 3 about putting sidewalks or other active transportation facilities such as trails. Again, there was definitely some support for there. That people feel that there is a need for some pedestrian measures to improve safety, but not necessarily perhaps on both sides, or not necessarily perhaps all trails. Definitely on one side for sure, depending upon the route. So moving forward through this study, we've gone now from a point where we have identified the need to widen the road corridor to 3 or 4 lanes and provide some type of active transportation corridor. And then further to that, we've looked at what is the existing right-of-way, how much room do we have to work within, recognizing that the corridor is largely built up. The exception is in this area, but that's the natural wooded area, so there's basically no potential for development here, and the future potential for development here is likely to happen. But the remainder of that is built up, so there's very little, if any, opportunity to widen the road in the town. Certainly from our discussions with town staff, they're not in a position, or there's no desire to seek a road widening and try to acquire additional property. So we're trying to work within the corridor, work within the footprint, or within the available space that we have. Largely a 20-meter right-of-way up to 58th Street, and then from 56th to 51st, it's a 23-meter right-of-way. There's a transition between the intersections, and then from 51st to the approach upon 45th, it's 26. It widens as we approach 45th, where we're transitioning from 2 to 5 lanes. And so that's the constraint that we're working within. And what we've established are whether different alternatives to implement increased traffic capacity, increased cycling and active transportation measures within those rights of way. So we've developed a number of alternative designs. And in this case, this is option 3A, so the 3 stands for the number of lanes, so this is a 3-lane option. And in this case, we're adding bicycle lanes on both sides, and we have sidewalks on both sides. So this top version is the 20-meter right-of-way, and you can see what the implications are is we need to put the sidewalk on the one side to the back of curb. On the other side, we're able to push it a little bit farther to make sure that there's room for street lighting. But here's the property line to property line. So you can see by the time you have your street lights, your fire hydrants, which again, fire hydrants want to be on the outside, we have little, if any, room for snow storage. In the 23-meter right-of-way, we can push the sidewalks out a bit, increase the boulevard, increase the snow storage, increase the offsets to property lines. In the 26-meter right-of-way, very similar thing happens. We're able to increase the boulevard. And you can see that we've not necessarily centered the road within the right-of-way to try to maximize the potential for snow storage and utility corridors. And the benefit of this particular cross-section is we do have a 13.5-meter road width, so it would be 3 lanes plus bike lanes, which is convertible to 4 lanes in the future if so desired, and that's the similar approach that's happening with River Road West. Okay, so that's the 3-lane option A, so that's 3 lanes with bike lanes. Option B is just 3 lanes, sidewalk on one side, multi-use trail on the other. So we've eliminated the on-road bike lanes in favor of a multi-use trail. And the thought here being was that the provision of a multi-use trail may appeal to a wider segment of your population, of the tourist population. You know, for instance, young children or families may be more apt to ride on a trail as opposed to putting their children on the bike lane with active vehicular traffic. So we maintain the 3 lanes and then sidewalk on one side, trail on the other, and the variations are just in the amount of boulevard that we have and the amount of snow storage that we would have. So then we get into the 4-lane options. Again, so this is the 4 lanes with bicycle lanes with sidewalks on both sides. And again, with the 20-meter right-of-way, you can see here's our property line here and here, which means that fire hydrants, utility corridors, snow storage would all be located outside the 20-meter right-of-way. So that would either require some property acquisition or easements to establish appropriate corridors for those. As we expand into the 23, it can fit. However, the sidewalks are being pushed right to the back side of the curb, which from a pedestrian perspective is not as preferred as having them out in the boulevard. We want to increase as much separation between the travel lanes and the pedestrian corridors as possible. Also provides for the necessary snow storage. But in this context, because we're doing 4 lanes plus bicycle, we're really maximizing out the amount of asphalt curb to curb. So if we eliminate the bicycle lanes in favor of the 3-meter trail, again, still 4 lanes, sidewalk on the north side, trail on the south side, 20-meter right-of-way, and we're at property line, utilities would be outside the property line, snow storage would be outside the property line. So in a 20-meter context, we do not have enough room to accommodate these. They can be accommodated in the 23 and 26, but certainly there are going to be some reduced boulevards within the 23-meter particularly. And the last option we looked at was a 4-lane option with a multi-use trail in lieu of sidewalks. So within the 20 and the 23-meter right-of-way, because of the constrained space, we can only put the trail on one side. And then as we get into the 26-meter, we're able to put the trail on both sides. So that's the disadvantage to this option, is that we only have pedestrian corridors on one side of the road. And for those who have tried to cross Mosley Street from one side to the other, and certainly this is a comment that has been consistent through the public meeting and consistent through comments received subsequent to that, is pedestrians are finding it very difficult to cross from one side to the other, particularly during the summer periods and particularly when they have young children as well. So there is a desire to have pedestrian facilities on both sides to enable them to get to a preferred crossing location, and we'll speak to that further. So then we've taken those different alternatives, looked at them in context of the various environments in which they're located. So from a natural environment perspective, we do have some natural environment areas. That large area that I spoke of earlier, that's largely undeveloped. It's crown land, I believe. But otherwise, there's no endangered or threatened species. There's no regionally or provincially rare species that were documented within the area. So in essence, while the widening of the road might eliminate some of the roadside boulevards and the open ditches, which can be considered as habitat area, we're certainly containing the road works within the road rights of way, and hence there's going to be very minimal impacts from a natural environment perspective. From the cultural heritage perspective, we had undertaken a stage 1 archaeological assessment, and they did identify some areas for moderate to high potential, and that's simply because of the history of the area, the proximity to the navigable waterways, the proximity to potable waterways, and the fact that past settlers might have used these areas as early settlement areas. So we do need to undertake a stage 2 assessment of this. However, we're not foreseeing any significant impacts that might result. From a social perspective, obviously the corridor is very much developed. We have a number of residential, commercial, and institutional uses along it. And obviously any impacts that would require, or any alternatives that would require road widening would have obvious impacts to the area residents, which certainly would not be desired. And then there is the potential for noise impacts as we go from a 2-lane road to a 4-lane road, but that's inherent with any increase in traffic volumes as we continue to grow. So not suggesting that I want you to read all the notes, but again, these are the same notes that were provided, and these are the same notes that will be presented to the public, but I think the graphical representation is what's key here. So the green represents a positive. The more the circle is completed, the greater the positive impact or the positive benefit. The red represents a negative impact, and again, the greater the circle, the greater the negative impact. So we look at the different alternatives in context of traffic operations, cycling operations, pedestrian operations, and transit operations, in addition to driveway operations, recognizing we do have a number of driveways that directly front onto Moseley Street. Stormwater management impacts to potential utilities, fisheries and aquatics, and where the circles are blank, that means there's no distinction between the alternatives. Wildlife impacts, vegetation impacts, impacts to land use, impacts to property and development impacts. So again, here where we need to widen particular rights of way to accommodate, you can see there's impacts. Aesthetics, noise impacts, construction impacts, archaeological and heritage impacts, and then getting into the financial aspects, the construction costs. And we have estimated that the construction could range from $8 million to $8.9 million. Sorry, there's the $7.4 million to $8.9 million, depending upon the cross section. Maintenance costs and land acquisition costs should land widenings be necessary. So we've undertaken a detailed review and assessment on that basis. And then I think if you look at it in context of traffic, 3 lanes are preferred to 2 lanes, 4 lanes are preferred to 3 lanes. In context of pedestrians, sidewalks are preferred on both sides of the road as opposed to one side, and sidewalks set back from the edge of the curb are preferred than backside of curb sidewalks. And in consideration of the cyclist needs, it's felt that the off-road trails would be preferable to the on-road bike lanes, given that they would serve potentially a wider range of users, particularly in context of the recreational nature of cyclists within this area. We're not focusing perhaps more so on the utilitarian, the people that will ride their bikes to work every day. They potentially would still use the road or use the off-road trail, but the trails would certainly serve better for the recreational users. So in context of those objectives and in context of the rights of way that we have and the desire to contain these within the existing rights of way, the recommended design concepts would be the 3-lane option with the off-road trail sidewalk on one side through the 20-meter right-of-way. And then when we get into the 23-meter right-of-way and the 26-meter right-of-way, where we have a little bit more property to work with, we can accommodate 4 lanes of travel and still maintain that sidewalk on the north side and the multi-use trail on the south side. And in all cases, we are able to provide a minimal boulevard between the sidewalk and the travel lanes, and then a minimal boulevard beyond the sidewalk to accommodate snow storage and utility corridors. So this is what we would be presenting to the public as our recommended solution at this point. Starting at the roundabout, transition from the roundabout to the 3 lanes, and then as you get into the wider right-of-way, transition to 4 lanes. As you get to 45th Street, that's where that transition would be to 5 lanes through the intersection, and then back to 4 as you continue easterly into town. And we spoke of the difficulties in pedestrians being able to cross. So again, this is our study area currently. The roundabout, we have a traffic signal at 58th Street currently. And if you recall, that was initially an intersection pedestrian signal where it would only be activated if pedestrians push the button. It was subsequently upgraded to full intersection signals. And then we have our signals at 45th, sorry. So one of the concerns raised by many was the ability to cross the road, and recognizing that if we're over at 61st or 60th, we'd all have to cross all the way, and there's no sidewalks along both sides. We're walking on the road. And then do pedestrians in fact walk across at the signal only to get back? So when we looked at the desire lines or the pedestrian corridors and beach access and spacing, the recommendation is to implement intersection pedestrian signals at the 62nd Street intersection and there's if you continue, there is a corridor right to the beach, and also to look at a pedestrian signal at 51st Street. Again, pedestrians can cross and get access to the beach at 50th Street. So these are the two intersections, 62nd and 51st. And if you continue on 62nd, you'll come up to the community mailboxes, and there is a trail right through here that gets access to the beach. And 51st, they simply take a short jog around and come up 50th, and then they have access to the beach there. So it was anticipated that these would be favorable to the area residents and tourists, and would provide some improved crossing opportunities, particularly in context of where they want to go and where they're coming from. So the next step, we'll present this same information to the public. We're anticipating, again, probably mid-September. Stemming any comments from that, revisit and finalize the assessment and the evaluation and the recommendations, so identifying what we would consider the preferred design option, prepare the final report for town review and endorsement, council endorsement, and the following which it would go on record for 30 days for further public review. And that would all be detailed in a notice of study completion, which would be circulated to the area residents and also posted in the local newspapers. And as I mentioned earlier, the design and implementation, which is really phase 5 of the Class EA study, will be subject to further council approval and funding to be undertaken at a later date. Excited if there are any questions or comments, happy to entertain.
Okay, thank you. Kevin, did you have anything to add before I open it up?
I don't think so. I think Mike did a great job. So.
Councillor Ego?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just 2 questions. Michael, at the very beginning of your slide presentation there was a slide showing responses that were received to all yes answers to the do you have any idea how many people or how many surveys were received on that questionnaire?
I'm going to get, this is a summary of each respondent. So in response to question 1, we did receive it's like 12 surveys. So some people did not necessarily respond to each question. So I believe we've received in the order of 12 to 15 comment sheets back, and those are primarily from those that attended the first Public Information Center.
Okay. The other question I have, I know at this time that it might not be possible to answer this, but do you have any idea of what the difference in cost would be between a 3-lane and a 4-lane?
Yes. So our alternative 3, we'll start with the lowest cost. This is 3 lanes with sidewalk and multi-use trails. We're looking at a cost of $7.4 million. If we were to implement bike lanes, that would increase up to $8.2 million. So that's both of those are the 3-lane options. So 7.4 to 8.2. And if we're looking at the 4-lane options, again, depending on whether we're looking at a trail on one side, sidewalk and trail, or bike lanes and sidewalks, that would range from $8.0 million to $8.9 million.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councillor Smith?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to the presenter, have you considered, this is sort of a bee in my bonnet, access to these sidewalks with ramps? Because I've been in the situation where you can't get off the sidewalk onto the next section when you cross the road. So have you are you looking at barrier-free access on these?
We're not looking specifically at it in the sense that would really come as part of the design process, but certainly any designs, any sidewalks that are being designed and constructed now need to be AODA compliant. So that would mean, yes, ramps at every intersection, whether that be signalized or unsignalized, and certainly the tactile wearing surface indicators, the raised bumps, would certainly be recommended, and at the signalized pedestrian crossings, they would be fully accessible as well with the pedestrian signal heads and countdown rail, all in compliance with current standards.
And I have one more, if I may, Madam Chair. Is the option 4C with the trails, what would happen to those trails in the wintertime? would they be plowed, or would they be?
Kevin, did you want to take that one?
Yeah, certainly they'd be maintained, as the sidewalks are plowed currently, so the sidewalk on the south side would be maintained as per sidewalk, and then we would maintain the multi-use pathway simply on the return, so it will be maintained, and we would certainly have to update our winter control policy to address specific policies for those multi-use pathways, but the intent is for the recreation would be that it be maintained just as the Lieu sidewalk.
So, one more further to that, Madam Chair. So if, when you talk about pathways, I think of dirt, you know, so are you looking at asphalt for those trails that you call trails? So,
Yeah, certainly.
hard surface?
Yeah, it would be, through detailed design, we would evaluate whether it be asphalt or concrete.
Right.
Asphalt may be more appropriate with line painting and delineation for directional arrows. That would be a detailed design element, but it wouldn't be a limestone screening pathway. It would be hard surface of some sort.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, Mayor Smith?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a question, a couple comments, if I may, through you to Michael. Michael, are you concerned, is there concern, or I'm assuming there is concern with respect to, as we get closer to the roundabout, going from 4 lanes to 3 lanes and bottlenecking? What do you see the issue being there, and how far into the future until we may be able to rectify that, or is it something we need to look at rectifying now?
I think currently the roundabout, so our roundabout is down at the west end. There are currently 2 lanes into the roundabout, 2 lanes out of the roundabout, and then through this 20-meter section, this is where we would recommend a 3-lane configuration to go to 4 lanes for this section. So from the roundabout to the 3 lanes, I think there's an easy transition that can be done, and I spoke with Kevin about this yesterday. That 3rd lane, the center turn lane, can either be extended right into the roundabout and simply becomes one of the westbound entry lanes, or you simply leave it as is at the roundabout, and once you get to, I believe it's 71st Street, that's where you would flare it out to 3 and start. So I don't see a difficulty in the transitioning from 3 lanes to the roundabout, in the sense that we're still only providing 1 lane per direction, and the roundabout can accommodate 2 lanes in and essentially 2 lanes out. And then through this area as well, that's where we would transition from 3 to 4 lanes. So we would have to drop the center turn lane in favor of 2 lanes per direction. So it may have to be something where you go to 3 lanes, potentially 5 lanes through the intersection, and then back to 4, much the same way that we're doing at 45th Street.
All right, the other concern, thank you, Michael. The other concern, if I may, Madam Chair, is that we will have, it appears that we're going to have 4 crossings there, and I know that I receive calls and emails now with respect to not being able to cross Mosley Street, and certainly not being able to cross it safely. I would like to see us look at even more crossings. They may not be signaled intersections, but at least crosswalks, and especially if we look from 58 to 71st Street there, that's quite a trek. And there's very little there. Now, yes, I see the streets are predominantly on the north side, but it is quite a trek there. So I'd like to see at least 1 more there, and maybe 1 more. And the crosswalk is fine, but maybe even between 51st and 58th Street there. And that's where we get a lot of pedestrian traffic. Other than that, my comments, Madam Chair, are that I support wholeheartedly having the trail versus the sidewalk. I think it's probably as economical, if not maybe more economical, if we do a trail and we're using asphalt as opposed to concrete for sidewalks, and easier to repair as we go through time. And it also keeps the bicycles off the roadway as much as possible, especially young kids. And we see that often. Only yesterday I watched a young child with mom, 2 kids on a little bike wobbling like they do right at the Mermaid Motel, and almost came off the sidewalk out onto the street. So I certainly support trails versus sidewalks, and I'd also like to see us a report maybe come back from staff in the not too distant future about sidewalks, and a plan to install sidewalks throughout our community, not just in the areas that we're redeveloping our roads, because that's desperately needed everywhere, and it would be good to see some costing and a plan put together for that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Belanger?
Thank you. Yes, just your experience, I guess, in delaying putting in a fourth lane. I think you're indicating at some point in the future we will have to go to 4 lanes. So I'm assuming those estimates included the increased space or land that you may have to purchase for that section.
Correct, yeah, so the cross sections that we developed can't fit within the existing rights of way, so it's only in that 20 meter right of way if you want to go to a 4-lane cross section. In this case, this is a 4-lane cross section with sidewalk on one side and trail on the other. So it'd only be in this context where if you wanted to go with 4 lanes that you would need to acquire property. Otherwise, the recommendation for the 3 lanes through this area, we can accommodate within the 20 meters without any property acquisition.
No, I don't have experience in roadway, but I know I have experience in other areas where we've done this, and the combined cost of the initial project and then the additional project later becomes a lot more money than had you do it up front.
Right, I see your point, yes. So, I mean, one option that we spoke of with the town was to implement the 3-lane all the way from end to end, and then potentially in the future convert that 3-lane within the easterly section to ultimately 4 lanes. But again, I think the consensus is, no, let's spend the money now, even though it's going to be a little bit more, we'll spend it now rather than incur it in the future, because it would be more economical to build 4 now rather than build 3 and then convert to 4 in the future. The westerly section here, I think we really are constrained by the existing right-of-way, so 3 lanes is effectively all we can fit unless the town is going to look at acquiring property. So if in the future you want to widen that to 4, there would be an incremental cost, but then there would be property.
Okay,
property costs
so
as
your estimates did not include going to 4 lanes in that stretch, or did?
The estimates did include, so for instance, the cost estimates for the 4-lane option, in this case option 4A, is 8.9 million, so that's 4 lane from end to end through the entire
and then
through the entire length.
And then the preferred option of 3 and 4 lanes with trail, what was the price of that?
The 3-lane option with the trail is 7.4 million. Now again, that's assuming you did the entire thing. So what we would have to do is take it piecemeal. So back of the envelope, we'd say half of the study area is going to be option 3B. So that would be in the order of 3.7 million. Half is going to be 4B, so that's 4.1 million. So 3.7 plus 4.1, 7.8 million for the entire thing. Right now, half would be 3 lanes and half is going to be 4 lanes.
1.1 million is the cost of additional cost of doing a 4 lanes all the way estimated.
That would be the difference, yes. Yeah. Now, if you were to do that in the future, it might be a little bit more because of all the throwaway costs. But again, that westerly section, we don't have the room to make a 4 lane.
Okay.
Thank you.
Kevin, did you have something?
Just another comment. You know, as one of the alternatives showed, there was an opportunity to build it to 4 lanes and then have the on-road bike lanes. But you know, as you can appreciate, and the preference is to have that boulevard separation from the cyclists and the kids biking, and having them on the road is sometimes there's challenges with that too. There are maintenance standards that are coming from the province to address these dedicated bike lanes in the future in terms of winter maintenance. So there's going to be some challenges with that as well. But the concept that we've demonstrated here is a balance, and we recognize that, you know, the 20-meter cross section with 3 lanes, it may and it will warrant widening in the future. And at that point, you know, the transportation design and planning will certainly, as it is changing now, to accept and implement and adopt alternate modes of transportation and transit. At that point in time, it'll be a discussion about, you know, are we comfortable with the congestion through that short section, or do we look to expand that? And I think the cost to remove, you know, the curb and the sidewalk and address the multi-use path to squeeze that in, it'll certainly be, I would think, over $2 or $2.5 million or whatever it might be. We can get those costs, but it's finding that balance between the trucks and the cars, the pedestrians, transit, and the cyclists, and we feel we have a good opportunity here to address all those needs, not just simply vehicular traffic, because there is a need to have those alternate modes and try and encourage people to not use their car, get on their bikes, use transit, and this is an option that we think suits all the modes of transportation.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Ego?
Yes, through you, Madam Chair, just one more question. Michael, when you give me these estimates, it looks like the difference between a 3-lane and 4-lane is between $1 and $1.5 million. The question I have was, does this include expropriations or easements or anything like that?
No, this is strictly construction costs.
Strictly construction?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Okay, anything else? Okay, thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
We do have a motion here moved by Mayor Smith, seconded by Councillor Smith. Be it resolved that the Public Works section of the Coordinated Committee does hereby receive the Mosley Street Urbanization Beechwood Road to 45th Street Municipal Class Environmental Assessment Study, Public Information Center number 2, presentation boards for information.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of committee, having heard the question, I'll call for the vote. Councillor Belanger?
In favor?
Councillor Gray?
In favor?
Councillor Ego?
In favor?
Councillor Smith?
In favor.
Mayor Smith?
In favor?
Councillor Stockwell?
Favor.
Chair by Fulci.
In favor.
Thank you. The motion carries on a vote of 7 in favor, 0 opposed.
Unfinished business, we have none. Other agency reports, none. Consent agenda, I believe we just have one item that has been pulled, item D, New Wasaga Beach River dredging. Is there anything else anybody else wanted to pull? Okay. So it's moved by Councillor Smith, seconded by Mayor Smith. Be it resolved that the Public Works section of Coordinating Committee hereby receives the August 17th, 2017 consent agenda items 4.4.1 through to 4.4.3, and that all the recommendations contained therein be adopted as amended.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the committee, having heard the question, I'll call for the vote. Councillor Belanger?
In favor?
Councillor Bray?
In favor?
Councillor Ego?
In favor?
Councillor Smith?
In favor.
Mayor Smith?
In favor?
Councillor Stockwell?
Favor.
Chair by Fulci.
In favor?
Thank you. The motion carries on a vote of 7 in favor, 0 opposed.
Thank you. And Kevin, I'll turn it over to you for river dredging.
Yeah, so Madam Chair, I penned an email that was received by members of council, and the request was to pull it for, I guess, questions if committee or anyone, members of council have any questions about the dredging operations that did take place in 2010, and I can certainly share with you our experiences and the process we followed on that. I wasn't sure in terms of what specific questions there were, but if anyone does have questions, I can certainly answer those.
Okay, and just before we open it up, we do have a picture in here. It's my understanding that the filter cloth that's washing up is being picked up as it's coming. The picture of these rocks, when I got the email, it looked like they were boulders. It's my understanding. I know the CAO was out there. They're actually smaller. Is that correct? Okay, just so we're all clear on that. Mayor Smith, you had a question or comment?
I did. Thank you, Madam Chair. I actually asked to pull this item, and the CAO and myself did have the opportunity last Friday to tour the beach, this area, as well as the rest of the beach, and have a conversation with John Fisher and his staff member on this item in particular. We went down and had a look at this beach. Mr. Sutton and many other the residents in New Wasaga Beach have some major concerns here, and I can completely understand why. My home used to be right almost maybe 200 feet down from where these pictures were taken, and I was living there at the time when the dredging was done, and yes, the dredging was extremely necessary, and yes, the MNRF and the town had to go through jump through a lot of hoops and whatnot in order to have the sand that was dredged from the bottom of the Wasaga River, that's a pretty darn clean river, tested to the nth degree to make sure that it wasn't contaminated, and before we could spread it, and then the spreading was done. And I think what nobody expected was to have all of this river rock, if you will, for lack of a better term, show up on the beach thereafter. This was a pretty pristine beach when you from a rock standpoint, if you will. prior to this dredging, and then these rocks, once it was spread out, showed up, and here we are today. Yes, the rocks might look a little larger in the picture, but I can tell you there are some, these aren't just pebbles, these are rocks that are, you know, I would say maybe anywhere from pebbles to up to 6-7 inches, some of them. And as a matter of fact, I think Mr. Fisher commented that he had actually picked up some of these rocks because it's great river rock for his garden. So, and then of course the filter media cloth, which was necessary, and we understand why it's there now. I'm not so concerned about that. It's being cut back as it is exposed, and the ministry's doing what they can for there. But I am concerned about the rock still. I'm concerned about any future dredging being done, if it's going to be spread on the beach, that it isn't screened beforehand. And hopefully at some point we'll get to a piece or an apparatus of equipment that's going to be able to pick up a lot of the rock that's there currently. The other major issue, however, that I'm aware of, and is the swamp, if you will, that's been created when this sand was spread. And there was always a low-lying area between the residents, homes and properties and the beachfront, but certainly mid to late spring that would dry up and you could walk through it and it wasn't a problem. Where now I think you could go down there even today, and there's a bit of a lake there. And so what happened was this dirt and dredging got spread out, and it created an even bigger swale, which is now a nesting ground and has been for years now since this has been done, for mosquitoes. And the residents certainly cannot just walk straight out from their property anymore, because they're having to walk through this mucky, wet, marshy area that has water in it, and that's just simply not fair. I think it's an easy fix. I think if you put another bulldozer back down there, maybe the same bulldozer they used to spread the dirt, and pushed it back a little further. I'm sure there's dune issues there and marram grass issues and so on and so forth, but it's certainly something that I think needs to be looked at and needs to be dealt with. I understand why we dredged the mouth of the Wasaga River, but in doing so, between ourselves, the town, and the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forest, we have created a beach that is not natural, and have created an issue with ponding and I'll call it swamp, that was not there before, for these residents who, quite frankly, pay high taxes and deserve to have the right to walk out of their property to the beach like everybody else. So it's a concern for me. I know it's a concern for the residents here. I know that they've continued to bring it up, and it's now obviously coming to a head because they've had all they can take, and it's something I think we need to seriously look at and find a solution to as soon as possible. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Kevin, just curious, I know when other developments happen, you can't affect neighbors, you can't do all of that. Was there pictures taken beforehand and after to make sure that it was left in a similar condition, or?
Certainly we've if I can maybe just show some of the,
sure,
the aerial photography, it might help to explain the limits. Is that too dark? So this is the area in question in terms of where the deposition took place. This is John Street and Kirby Lane, and you can see the area now. This is in 2008. We undertook the dredging in 2010, and then I'll show you some after photos, and you can see the groundwater leaching through this area, but absolutely there was not the cobble to the extent of what you see today. When you look at post-dredging, you can see this is the area in which the dredged material was displaced along that area. And this may be some of the pockets that you're referring to, Mr. Mayor, as well as some of the other areas. So you can tell there it was saturated at the time, but you know, has this created a berm to further that the growth of weeds and grasses and saturation. In terms of you know, consultation and coordination, it was an exercise that we undertook in very short order, and it was impressive actually in terms of how the various agencies came together to address this emergency that was duly required. Now, when we did spread the material, you know, as you know, it was really a focus on the quality of the dredging. It wasn't necessarily the analysis of it in terms of composition or the sieve size of the material that's in place. So it was more looking at metals and inorganics and whether it was warranted to be placed. We spread that. It was probably 18 to 24 inches in some areas on average. Certainly some areas were a little higher, but it was displaced predominantly along those low-lying areas to kind of pad some of that saturated ground condition. Ontario Parks haven't approached the town, or I haven't had discussions from John about assisting with that collection, and certainly if that's the direction of the committee and council, we can have that discussion to see what opportunities exist to screen out some of that cobble. But I think we still haven't concluded the EA from the river dredging, and we're at the final screening through the M&R before it goes public, that ESR document. And through this process and subsequent to some of the challenges that were presented through deposition from the 2010 dredging, the preferred alternative will be to haul off-site. That's the likelihood of the outcome of this EA, is that we will not be displacing that material unless, certainly if the M&R support screening that, but there are certainly costs involved with that as well, and whether we just haul it off-site and sell it as fill, there's an opportunity to balance the cost. But through the current EA, the preferred alternative is off-site haulage, unless it's suction dredge and there's an opportunity to transport further into the bay. But that's what we're looking at right now.
Okay, Mayor Smith?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, Kevin, could you just go back one slide there, please? So you can see, as you can see here, there was some wet area there, or damper areas there, and again, we don't know what time of year or when these pictures were taken. If you go back forward now, Kevin, please, you will see that there is clearly a lake there, and that
this is today, and it's that
and there we go. And that, I know I've been out there several times, and at some points that water is as deep as 2 feet. It's not, it's not just a damp area, and it was not there before.
No,
and so
that's, you're correct. You can see this is 2002, 2008, and then 2012. It's condensed or focused, and then it exists throughout. And whether the M&R or Ontario Parks supports the spreading of that material, again, if that's the direction you want us to pursue, we can certainly facilitate that to the best of our abilities, and what approvals might be necessary to do that.
So what I'm hearing, though, moving forward, any further dredging will be probably hauled off-site. It'll be a different process. So maybe recognize some issues with this one.
Mechanical dredging, if it's all a function of where the siltation occurs. If it's in proximity to the shoreline, as it was in 2010, it was very easy to construct that platform for the trucks to get out, and then they hauled it back to shore. When it gets further out beyond a point where you can build that platform, then you need barges, or suction dredging with, you can get suction dredges with hoses that you can extend 1 kilometer, and whether you displace that on shore or through a filter bag, or whether you just haul it out into the bay, there's various options. But through the consultation and the screening process with Ontario Parks, the recommendation is not to place it on the beach. Okay.
And so there is also opportunity for you to speak with John Fisher about fixing this situation. I think that's what I'm hearing around the table.
Certainly, if that's the direction, we can, I can inquire in terms of what support we can provide. If it's a matter of, removing the cobble, or in a perfect world, if in reality, if we would have had that barber surf rate back, we could have used it. Maybe we'll get him up for another demonstration, and he can run it through that area. But if that's the direction, we'll help facilitate that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate that, Kevin, and speaking to them, because I think this is an issue that has been created by a combination of the town, of course, requesting the dredging and the MNRF, and we need to fix this problem for the citizens up there. With respect to the cobble, I know that we're looking at the ministry is looking at the possible purchase of the barber surf rake, and maybe come back to this council to assist with that. But I'm not sure what size of rock that barber surf rake can handle, but I'm sure that that type of equipment here would alleviate a lot of the pebble here and fix a lot of the issues, so that's a good thing. I just want to comment with future dredging. I want to make clear, I support when we dredge, to put that sand back on our beach. As we know, we have a relic beach, and we've lost a good lot of sand, and so any opportunity we get to put sand back on the beach, we should be doing that. But in future, it may be a little more costly, but to screen that before it hits the ground, I think would be good, because if we, I mean, we're not going to get this type of sand anywhere else except for the bottom of our water. So I support wholeheartedly putting it back on the beach. It's how we do it that matters. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councillor Blanchet?
Thank you, Chair. Just to add to Mayor Smith's comments, I also had the opportunity to meet and tour with Mr. Sutton, and a couple of issues that weren't mentioned is the high level waters is now eroding a lot of these larger size stones actually into the bay, and that's creating some issues for the recreational activity within the water. They had previously had no stones whatsoever, and now when you go into the water, you have to be very careful that you're not stepping or banging on pretty significantly sized stones. The other thing is, we talk about cobble, but the actual composition of the entire beach is closer to gravel. Certainly it was very clear in walking the beach. You can see the distinct change in quality of sand as soon as you get beyond where the material was spread. It was suggested that over time a great deal of sand has been blowing up under our boardwalks and that type of thing, and that you know, even after we were to possibly redistribute that and might be able to fill in some of that ponding, there may be the requirement to get some higher quality sand back onto that beach. And as you know, in that area there's a number of accommodation providers that it's just a natural access point where their customers would go in and enjoy the beach right at that point where that was spread. So certainly I know Lieu's cottages and a number of providers have some significant concern as to the quality of the beach in that area.
So Kevin certainly can't commit to any of that, but you're hearing what's around the table, and I'm assuming you'll take all of this back and hopefully have a discussion with John.
Absolutely, and in terms of transporting, you know, beach blow sand from one area to another, I don't know if that is permitted. And just from briefly reading their most recent beach management plan, I don't believe that's permitted. But certainly, point noted, and if there's opportunity there, that's an opportunity that we'll consider.
Okay, Councillor Ego.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the members of council that were at AMO this week, we had the opportunity of meeting with the Minister of the MNR. And one of the things that sort of jumped out at me was about the destruction of the plovers and why. And I understand it was because of the herring. And we had a resident herring this year that apparently had lunch on the plovers, and that's why there was only one left. Now, this come down from the ministry. I was sort of surprised at the time, but then when I started putting two to two together, if you take a look at wetlands and that have been created by the ministry, that's where a herring would come in and camp. A herring come in and camp, and of course is fed on the plovers, which they are looked after and they protect to no end, and have created this problem. And also, there has been sightings of snapping turtles in that area. So between that, this is not probably the best area for looking after plovers with these two species that like to have lunch on them. So I understand and I reiterate again that by creating wetlands and letting the grasses grow and the weeds grow, we're bringing in other predators that are preying on the protective species. So I think this should be looked into, because this is probably one of the main problems that the wetlands is causing. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. So Kevin, I think you've heard lots, and I'm sure you'll take it back, and then maybe you can update this committee next month or so. Okay, great. Thank you. It's moved by Mayor Smith, seconded by Councillor Smith. Be it resolved that the Public Works section of the Coordinating Committee does hereby receive the letter from Mr. Jim Sutton with respect to the river dredging that was done in 2010 for information.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the committee, having heard the question, I'll call for the vote. Councillor Belanger.
In favor?
Councillor Bray.
In favor?
Councillor Ego.
In favor?
Councillor Smith.
In favor.
Mayor Smith.
In favor?
Councillor Stockwell.
Favor.
chaired by Fulci.
In favor?
Thank you. The motion carries on a vote of 7 in favor, 0 opposed.
Okay, thank you. So that is the end of the Public Works section. We will reconvene at, eyes are going.
25.
Yeah, 10:25. Thank you.
the mayor. I think I'll call this meeting back to order. Gentlemen, back to order, please.
Certainly.
Thank you. Just one comment before we get to the agenda, if I may. It is the mayor's birthday today, so I think we'll wish him happy birthday. Happy birthday.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate that.
No cake, no candles.
It's okay.
Do I look like an eat cake?
And I believe our Doug wanted to introduce a new staff person, so that's okay. Are you going to introduce personally? Here,
Yes,
Doug?
I thought
No?
he'd be here.
No?
He's down there. He's down there.
Is he?
Sorry.
Happy birthday to you.
Yeah.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Enough.
How old are you?
There.
52.
Yes, thank you.
Oh.
Oh, gee.
So, Director of Planning, I will turn you over
It
for,
sucks.
turn this over to you for introductions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to take the opportunity to introduce members of committee and members of council to our new planner. This is Kemi Akinishili. Kemi comes to us from Alberta. He was a planner in Cochrane, Alberta, which is just outside of Calgary. And Cochrane, very much like Wasaga Beach, is a very small town undergoing intense growth. And Kemi, so go ahead.
Thank you. I do want to just introduce myself once again. My name is Kemi Sheila. Yes, so I've been out in Alberta for the last 7 years. So I've worked with various medium to small town communities, including, as Doug said, the town of Cochrane. So thank you for welcoming me here, and I look forward to meeting you guys more individually. And my office is just upstairs if you want to stop by, or you can come to you guys, and look forward to working with you all in the future.
Welcome, Kemi.
Welcome. Thank you.
So Kemi will be taking over all of Sheena's files, and for the next 2 weeks, Sheena is bringing him up to speed on those files as we move forward.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome. Okay, getting on to the formal part of our agenda. Deputations, petitions, presentations, and public meetings, we have none. Unfinished business, there's a list here. Other agency reports, we have none. And we'll move on to the consent agenda, and at this point, there's nothing that has been pulled, unless there's something last minute from council. So I will then resolve that we, moved by Councillor Belanger, seconded by Councillor Stockwell, resolved that the Development Services Section of Coordinating Committee hereby receives the August 17, 2017 consent agenda items 5.1 through 5.4.3, and that all the recommendations contained therein be adopted.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Having heard the question, I'll call for the vote. Councillor Belanger.
In favor?
Deputy Mayor by Fulcher.
In favor?
Councillor Bray.
In favor?
Councillor Ego.
In favor?
Mayor Smith.
In favor.
Councillor Stockwell.
Favor.
Chair Smith.
In favor.
Thank you. The motion carries on a vote of 7 in favor, 0 opposed.
So I guess we call it adjourned.
Madam Chair.
Yeah, that's all part of, yes.
Madam Chair, if I may, I see we've talked about this, but we do not have anywhere on the agendas for other items. And if I may, I'd like to put an item for future consideration with respect to deposits received by developers from citizens with respect to lot grading or any other deposits that developers may be requesting from citizens. So we can have some discussion on this in future. If I may, Madam Chair, explain where I'm coming from here. I've received some calls and had a meeting with one resident in Pine Valley with respect to what happened there in the past. These residents had all paid a $1,000 lot grading deposit to Pine Valley, and Pine Valley subsequently back then went bankrupt, and these folks never received their money back. The town did return those deposits to the developer. The developer didn't return those deposits to the citizens in that community. Since then, as we know, Pine Valley has started up again, and the residents' concerns are that they understand the developer in the past went bankrupt, and so they're out of luck. But their concern now is that it's the same name, it's the same players. It may be a different numbered company, but it's everything else predominantly is the same. And I think it's important that we look at this. I have had discussions with our manager of planning, Doug Heron, on this, and he is currently speaking to staff and looking into this, but it's a discussion we need to have because it's important we protect our residents with respect to that moving forward in future. And how we do that, I'll depend on the expertise of staff to come up with something there, but I'd like to see that on a future agenda, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, so noted. Thank you. So having no further business on the agenda for this committee, we'll have a short recess for the admin assistants to get twisted around here, and recess is part of the
Oh no, that's supposed to be me, but I'm just here already, so.
Really important.
Sure.
Look how busy she is.
Oh, that is you.
Oh, sorry, yeah, I'm just gonna stay here.
Okay, I would like to call back to order the coordinated committee of August 17th with the general government section. For deputations, petitions, presentations, and public meetings, we have none. Unfinished business, we have none. Other agency reports, there are none. We have a consent agenda with the following items that have been pulled for discussion. 6.4.1B, 3, the update on the status of the liquor license for the Dardanelles. Under C for finance, Wasaga Beach Ministerial Food Bank, and the 2017 second quarter financial report. And 6.4.2, the accountants. So there's probably motions somewhere on the table.
They're right there.
Everything else?
Yeah.
All these,
Just the last page of the closed session.
My sister's cottage.
Yeah.
Topography is. She gets nervous.
everything else, signed, right?
Yeah, she did. She initially, and then when the trip was short, she was
It's not worth it.
she was like, window shopping. She wasn't.
I have no money to shop. You want to go buy it, yeah.
Want to buy.
I hate window shopping.
She
Yeah.
She said, I'm not going down there.
Okay, the motion is moved by Councillor Smith, seconded by Councillor Ego. Resolved that the General Government Section of Coordinated Committee hereby receives the August 17th consent agenda, items 6.4.1 through to 6.4.3, and that the recommendations contained therein be adopted as amended.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Having heard the question, I'll call for the vote. Councillor Boulanger.
In favor?
Deputy Mayor Byfolchi.
In favor?
Councillor Ego.
In favor?
Councillor Smith.
In favor.
Mayor Smith.
In favor?
Councillor Stockwell.
Favor.
Chair Bray. Thank you. The motion carries on a vote of 7 in favor, 0 opposed.
First item to have been pulled was the update on the status of the liquor license for the Dardanelles. Deputy Mayor Byfolchi?
Thank you. Just a couple of things. I guess my own opinion on this is that the agreement was breached, but it's my understanding that they are moving forward to get a liquor license. That should take 3 to 4 months tops. So if at that point we find that they've run into issues, would we go back out to an RFP, or would we go and look at the original first recommended person at that time? But basically by Christmas we should know if they can get a liquor license or not, and if not, rather than leave it to the last minute again, would we be dealing with it at that time?
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. Yeah, the process, as I understand, takes between 8 and 12 weeks, so between 2 and 3 months, maybe 4 months. So certainly it would be my intent to bring a report back to committee if such the process was that they were unable to get a liquor license.
Okay, and then I guess my last question would be, did we receive the 10,000 deposit, and did we receive the 20,000 payment that was due on August 10th?
Madam Chair, through to the Deputy Mayor, yes, we have received the 10,000 deposit, and we did receive the rent.
Thank you.
Mayor Smith?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to further to the Deputy Mayor's comments. So George, I think what I would like to see in this case made clear to our tenant is that they now know that they're not going to be able to negotiate a deal with the current liquor license holder, is my understanding. So I'd like to see something in writing to them and from them saying that they are starting that process, and they're starting that process now. They're not going to wait till January or February. So perhaps there should be something there to them that says you know, we're going to give you to a certain date, and maybe that is December 31st or December 1st, if it's 8 to 12 weeks, whatever that is. I would say give them a couple of extra weeks just in case, but they need to get on it now, because we do need to know if they're not going to be able to get a license. We want to get back to make sure that we can get a tenant for that building.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. The town is involved in the processing of a liquor license application. The municipality has to sign off. The various departments are asked for their comments and whatnot. We have received the circulation from the AGCO, and staff have provided comments back to the AGCO on the application. So we know the application has been submitted. So with respect to the letter that you speak of, again through you, Madam Chair, yes, that is our intent. The lawyer and has been in conversation with town staff with respect to drafting a letter to the tenants to advise them with respect to the requirement of the liquor license, and also with respect to the opening or not opening for the balance of the season.
And so, if I may, Madam Chair, supplementary. So that was my next point. They opened the first weekend with a special occasion permit. I was surprised that council wasn't made aware of that. And then they opened a second time, my understanding is with no license or permit. Is that correct?
Through you, Madam Chair, I'm not aware of opening a second time. I don't know that for a fact. They may have. I know they had talked about opening without a liquor license, but I don't know if they, in fact, did that. But certainly they did open the one weekend with a special occasion.
And to be clear, I mean, I think they're more than welcome to open without a liquor license as long as they're not serving liquor. They want to do the rest of the season selling French fries and hot dogs, and so be it. But I think we need to make clear that they are not to sell liquor until they have their liquor license. Thank you, Madam Chair.
No more comments, so read the motion. Moved by Councillor Smith, seconded by Councillor Ego, resolved that the General Government Services Section of Coordinated Committee receive the status report on the liquor license at Dardanelle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Having heard the question, I'll call for the vote. Councillor Belanger?
In favor.
Deputy Mayor by Fulci?
In favor?
Councillor Ego?
In favor.
Councillor Smith?
In favor.
Mayor Smith?
In favor?
Councillor Stockwell?
In favor.
Chair Bray?
In favor.
Thank you. The motion carries on a vote of 7 in favor, 0 opposed.
Next item to be pulled was the Wasaga Beach Ministerial Food Bank. There's no other comments. That was me that pulled it. At the deputation that was made at the last meeting, I had asked for the report to come forward and include other food bank or other food providers in our community. And I didn't see anything on here about St. Vincent de Paul. And I know that this came forward supplementary to our grant request, which is why we were discussing it, but we reopened it by offering them more than they earned through the grant request. So I said if we were kind of breaking that policy, then we should look at all the food banks and make sure that we were being fair and equitable to anybody that's providing support in the community, not just one. So I'm not sure if my question is maybe to Jocelyn, who authored the report, who could maybe join us.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I didn't understand from the last meeting that I was to include information in the report about the other food bank, and I can bring forward something for Council. I would just need to know what type of information you would want brought forward, because we wouldn't have financial statements on another food bank. So if I could get some direction from Council as to what they'd be looking for.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a comment is that we have a grant application, and we've never, to my best of my knowledge, received anything from the other food bank. And I think the original food bank request, the ministerial one, came through the grant process and then further. So my feeling is they have never asked for a grant in the past. If they wanted to apply to the grant process, the door's open, as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you. And my concern to that would just be that we do have a grant process. The motion that's coming forward today contravenes that grant process. They went through, they got what they got, and now we're looking to provide them more.
Point of order, Madam Chair. That was part of the approved budget, not under grants.
Sorry, the point of order is for?
To just clarify, you said that they came through the grant process. They did not. They were part of the approved budget.
This council voted on the amount of the
20,
grant, and that was where
in the
where
budget,
the 12,000
no,
came from. So
they took it out of there, but it was a budgeted line item. It was a budgeted
So I'm
line
sorry.
item.
So your point of order is
The fact that you said they took it out of the grant process. That was the whole point of bringing it up, was that it wasn't supposed to be part of the grant process. It was part of a budgeted line item because they came and asked if they had to come back every year, we would just put it on a line item. So we did, and all they're asking for is the difference on the line item and what we gave them out of the grant process, but it never should have gone to the grant process because it was already budgeted.
so this motion is for an additional grant. So we're still talking about our grant policy. Mayor Smith?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Maybe for some clarity, I'm going to do the best I can. As I recall, in the beginning when we dealt with the food bank came to council asking council to make their the funds to the food bank on an annual basis become a line item in our budget. And council, as I understand it, agreed to that, and we agreed to $24,000. Somehow, after that, and I'm just going from my recollection here, somehow after that, when we went through the grant process, the food bank ended up on the grant process. And we all did what we do and submitted our numbers. And there's where I am still confused, as I said at the last meeting. I'm still confused how we went from agreeing to make $24,000 a budgeted line item annually for the next 2 or 3 years to getting mixed up now again in the grant process and that number being decreased through the grant process. We were confusing, or we're mixing two different items here, and I don't know how it got there or how the treasurer of the day got there. I'm sure she had something in her head that made sense. It's not making sense to me today. I was pretty clear when I voted for $24,000 as a budgeted line item that it was out of the grants. And so again, I can't tell you how we got where we're here, but there is confusion here, and I think that we need to maybe clarify that. When I looked at this report, I certainly looked at it because I know that I voted in favor of making it a budgeted line item, and they're simply asking for us to make up what we agreed to give them and didn't through the budget, not through the grant process. I understand the word grant is in here, but again, I don't know how these two got conjoined. So.
Madam Chair, maybe if we might ask the treasurer just to elaborate, because I think in the background of the report there is a little bit of a chronology that might help explain how this came to be. Just at the bottom of page 1, maybe we'll just ask the treasurer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, in December of 2015, when the food bank came forward and they did a deputation, it was at that time that they requested the $24,000 be established as a separate budget line item. And then in 2016, when the approval was given at that time by council, it was approved for $20,000 in January of 2016, or I beg your pardon, it was approved for $11,805. And at that time, it was stated that the $11,805 would carry forward for 2017 and 2018, and a separate line item would be established. During the draft budget process for the 2017 budget, it came forward at that time in one of the drafts to move it down from $24,000 down to $20,000. So that's where we have currently a 2017 budget line item separate from the grant program for $20,000. I believe that what might help is if in the staff report we start to refer to it as a donation rather than a grant, and we might get some clarity between the two programs, because this is a donation. So at this time, the approval from prior council meetings is that the donation for 2017 would be $11,805. We have a budget of $20,000 available. and the request in is for 24,000 that they are requesting. So we need to, if we are moving forward with the 24,000, it's 4,000 above the current year's budget level.
So Madam Chair, just if that, does that clarify for you, your worship, in terms
Well,
of?
If I may, Madam Chair, it clarifies it as clear as mud, because again, I'm struggling how we got, and clearly we obviously did somehow, but I'm struggling how we got from saying 24,000 or 20,000 as a budget line item through the grant process to come to 11,000 and 11,805. I don't know how we got there, I'm sorry. So I know what the intent was, or what I believe the intent was, and that's why I think we need to go back. We need to deal with this today so as that they're getting what it is that I think we all agreed upon in the beginning, which was the 24,000.
Councillor Eagle?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Well, boy, we've kicked this around. Anyways, my understanding was that in the grant process, we came up with $11,805, whatever it was, through the grant process, with the terminology at that time that it would be changed over the next year to a budget item. And that was my understanding, and my understanding was that it would be changed over to a budget item at $20,000 in the budget. And again, my understanding, or what I don't understand is how did it get 24,000? That I don't have any idea how it ever got there, and that's what I can't figure out. Like, this has been all over the place.
Councillor Belanger?
Thank you, Chair. I was the original individual to bring this forward to review and reconsideration, and done quite a bit of research, and maybe the CAO could answer a question for me. It is my understanding is that the maximum amount allocated on a grant is $5,000. And in 2015 was the first year that the food bank approached council and requested to be removed from the grant process and to be a budgeted line item at $24,000. Council approved the $24,000 for a period of 3 years. At some point after that, and as memories faded, the treasurer included the $24,000 onto a form with other grants in the amount of $5,000, and everybody voted. And at that point, the first year, 2015, the average was $13,000. The next year, it went through the same process, and the average of the council at the time was $11,800. But both those decisions were opposed to what had already approved, which was a budgeted line item of $24,000 for 3 years. So over the last 2 years, we have actually shorted the food bank a significant amount of money of what was approved, as opposed to going back to that. The reconsideration was to get back to what was originally intended, to provide $24,000 a year to the food bank as a budgeted line item donation, if we want to call it that. In talking to the CAO, because the budget this year was reduced by the treasurer to $20,000 and approved by council, it was suggested that we take the $20,000 out of the budgeted line account, and that the remaining $4,000 come from what's remaining in the grant money for this year, and that going forward for the next 2 years, that we would go back to a budgeted line item of $24,000 or a donation to the food bank. Hopefully that clarifies everything for everyone.
Mr. Senior?
Thank you. Just to correct one thing that the councillor said with respect to the budget. Council can only deal with a budget in the current year. So the budget, the line item in the budget is $24,000. That was the direction that staff was given. That was put in the budget. So putting a placeholder or putting an amount in the budget is one thing. Then there's the donation review request. And if members of council are familiar with, you often get requests for large sums, and you go through a review process. And council in its wisdom makes decisions with respect to how much money it's going to provide based on its review of the applications. One of the key criteria that's used is financial need. So although an organization may request a large sum of money, when you go through the financial statements and you look at what their operating budgets are, what their capital budgets, how much they have in the bank, and whether it's a GIC or whatnot, council in its wisdom may say, although you've asked for X, we're going to give you Y based on what you've submitted to us. So my point there is, although 24,000 may have been in the budget, and that was as per council direction, council in its wisdom decided that it was going to allocate the 11,805, and that was the decision. And there's a resolution that's there that, you know, you can't argue with the resolution. That's what it says. So I'm not sure. I'm not going to second guess why council made that decision. It made that decision. If it wishes to alter that decision, that's within council's purview. And now you have a request from the food bank to increase the amount that's been allocated for 2017. And I would urge committee to assess the request. Does it have merit? Do they have a financial need? And if you feel that they have a need, then vote in favor of the request. If not, then you have different options. So I'll leave it at that.
Councillor Eco, I think I saw your hand first.
Yeah. So from my recollection, and I don't know how many times we've kicked this around, but anyways, from my recollection is, I clearly remember, and I would love to see the minutes of the previous meetings, that we went at any time to 24,000. At no time did we go to $24,000. I remember us going to 20,000, and I remember us saying that we would go from the thing, from that to the from a grant to a line item. I can never remember, and when this come down before, I agreed to $20,000. All of a sudden, it's back in here again, $24,000, and I can't agree with it at 24,000.
Mayor Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Is there? There's a motion before us here now. Is there? Could you just read it, if you would, please?
There's two more comments. Want me to read the motion first?
Take the comments. That's fine. It's up to you, Madam Chair.
Sorry.
I'm fine if you take the comments first. I want to hear the motion. That's all. But you can, yeah.
Councillor Pelosian.
Yes. First of all, thank you for the clarification, George. But again, the review you spoke about, my understanding is it got into a grant process format as opposed to a review of a budgeted item. As for the $24,000 to respond to Ron Eagle, Laura, you had provided me the documentation. I'm not sure if I have it with me or not, but I will ask the deputy clerk if she can confirm that the amount was $24,000.
Councillor Belanger requested the document from council, or the budget that was approved from last year, which I pulled up, and the line item for the food bank cost that said $24,000.
Thank you.
Outside of that, I'm not sure. That's just the number I see on paper.
When was that? When was that?
That was approved in the budget.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just to clarify that, the reason it was $24,000 is quite clear. It was because their rent is $2,000 a month, and they were looking to be able to cover their rent, and that's where the $24,000 came from. It was very clear.
Okay. I will read the sorry. Oh, I had okay. Two more comments, and I'll read the motion.
Sure. I guess my issue is whether it's 20 or 24. I think we have a motion. I think we should just be reading it. As far as the other information that Chair Bray had asked for last month, I'd like to see it. If we have another group in town who is feeding those in need, I think we need to be considering it during budget time as well. We need to know how many people they are servicing, what are their financial situations, if they're interested. But I think that we could reach out to them and say, if you're interested, provide us this information, because we're already supporting one food bank. If there's more out there, then we should be looking at it. So I would like to see that information.
Councillor Stockwell.
Madam Chair, I'm prepared to support the 24,000. However, I think we owe it to the food bank. If we honestly think this is the end of the trail, we owe it to the food bank to tell them that. Because the food bank's got the thought that, you know, it's going to be 24 this year, it's going to be 26 next year, it's going to be, and there's no end to it. And that's, I think they almost get the impression that if we can't get enough money from grants and everything else, then we'll go back to council and we'll get it there. And I'm happy to say 24, but as the CAO pointed out, we can't really make commitments beyond the term of council. And I just think we have to say to the food bank, here's your 24, and if you come back in future years, you know, it won't be this council, but you'll have to keep in mind that there's an end to this thing. Because other than that, let's get into the food bank business. And I don't think that's a good idea.
Councillor Pelagic? Yes, I don't want to extend the discussion anymore, but I will tell you the other food bank in town did reach out to me. We had a discussion. I had offered that I would like to come and visit them and meet them and see their operation. They had not followed up on that. But I will tell you what they told me is they service about 30 families versus the 400 families that are serviced by the Ministerial Food Bank. And furthermore, that it's by appointment only, so there is no hours of operation. It's very small in comparison. So it's
Okay, I'm going to read the motion. Moved by Councillor Smith, seconded by Deputy Mayor Bagolci. Resolved that the General Government Services Section Coordinating Committee recommend to Council to receive the Treasurer's report on the Wasaga Beach Ministerial Food Bank request for financial support for discussion. And further, that the Council provide an additional grant in the amount of $12,195 to the Wasaga Beach Ministerial Food Bank for 2017. And further, that Council direct staff to include in the 2018 operating budget for consideration by Council a $24,000 grant to the food bank. Further, subject to approval of the budgeted amount for 2018, the receipt of financial statements from the food bank and the satisfactory review of those financial statements by Council, the Council consider making a $24,000 donation for the 2018 year. And finally, the Council recommend to the next Council that it give consideration to including a $24,000 grant to the food bank in the 2019 operating budget. Mayor Smith?
So again, Madam Chair, in this resolution, I'm hearing grant and I'm hearing donation. Let's clarify what this is going to be. Is it going to be a grant? Is it going to be a donation? Is it going to be a budgeted line item? Because I, for one, do not want to end up back at this table in another year having this discussion again.
Should be a grant.
Deputy Mayor Bagolci, your hand was up next.
I was just going to say I'm fine with the motion. You know, clarity on those words is fine, but except for the last paragraph, I struggle making a recommendation to the next council. I think the next council will sit and look at what is put before them, what has been paid in the past, and they can make a decision at that time. But for us to sit here and try and tell them what they should be doing in 2019 is kind of, I don't know, I don't agree with that.
Any other comments?
I don't think the next council's going to listen to this council.
Well, then why put it in, right?
Councillor Smith, you had your hand up?
Yes, I was just going to, two things. I'm hearing what the Deputy Mayor's saying, and perhaps with the motion we could just take off that last paragraph. Also, our grant process only allows for $5,000. So they wouldn't be going through grants if it's higher than that, and how that ended up on the grant request, it should have been eliminated right away because it was not fun. So I think it's our responsibility as councillors to carefully look at those donations when they come through with the donation request to make sure that also what we're looking at is correct.
Absolutely. And my thoughts going forward are just that when we take it from a grant request, which gets reviewed annually by council, and we take it to a donation, we just have to be careful, and I think we really need to look at all social services because providing food may or may not be the only answer. Councillor Ego in the past has talked about food cards. you know, there's different social services out there, so I just don't want to make this a long time permanent grant, because I think this world is evolving faster than any of us can keep up. So, are we willing to make a friendly amendment to remove the last line from there? There was
Just split the
Deputy Mayor and Councillor Smith.
So the mover and seconder, it's Councillor Smith, and its seconder is Deputy Mayor Fulci, so it's up to them. And the motion has been read, so it would be a motion to amend to delete this paragraph, because you've already read the motion. So it would be a motion to amend to delete this last paragraph.
Not split the motion.
What?
You could, that's an option, I guess, is if at a request from the floor to split the motion. If the mover and seconder are prepared to deal with that, then you could split the motion.
I'd rather not split it, I'd rather see it removed. I'd like to vote on the amendment to remove it, because I think it's inappropriate to have it on there, to be honest with you.
Madam Chair, I think the mover and seconder both agreed to that, so I don't think we need to split it. I think they've agreed to remove it, so it's as amended.
We just, Madam Chair, just from a procedural standpoint, because the motion has been introduced to the Assembly, it means there's a formal.
No, me too. Okay.
So the Deputy Clerk has prepared that, so.
But you can split. Joe will get him $80,000 before it's over. Let's hope they don't move again.
Do we have that movie? Sorry, it's so crooked.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, no, it's
It says on there.
2019, not 18.
Sorry, that's removing after that line, so this is what's being removed.
Okay,
Why is that there? We've got second, third, financial. That's not what we're.
no, we're
Oh,
not
whoops,
doing
okay, sorry, that's just, I was looking at the wrong.
We're dealing with
I think it's the
the
municipal
yeah,
grant.
it's-
Sorry,
that's
I'll
what
change
was
the
wrong.
lining, but it will be that.
Yes.
But, so that it's
It's for the food bank, so I'll
Yeah.
just change the title of the report.
2000.
Right, yes.
Wasaga Beach Ministerial Food Bank. Be it resolved that the recommendation now before coordinated committee be amended by removing the following after that council consider making a $24,000 donation for the 2018 year. And finally, the council recommend to the next council to give consideration to including a $24,000 grant to the food bank in the 2019 operating budget. Mr. CEO.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Having heard the question, I'll call for the vote. Councillor Boulanger?
In favor?
Deputy Mayor Fulci?
In favor?
Councillor Eagle?
In favor.
Councillor Smith?
In favor.
Councillor Stockwell?
Favor.
Mayor Smith?
In favor?
Chair Bray?
In favor.
Thank you. The motion carries on a vote of 7 in favor, 0 opposed.
Until next time.
Now I will read the new motion. Moved by Councillor Smith, seconded by Deputy Mayor Fulci. Resolved that the General Government Services Section of Coordinated Committee recommend to Council that it receive the Treasurer's report on the Wasaga Beach Ministerial Food Bank request for financial support for discussion. And further, the Council provide an additional grant in the amount of $12,195 to the Wasaga Beach Ministerial Food Bank for 2017. And further, the Council directs staff to include in the 2018 operating budget for consideration by Council the $24,000 grant to the food bank. And further, subject to approval of the budget amount for 2018, the receipt of financial statements from the food bank and the satisfactory review of those financial statements by Council, the Council consider making a $24,000 donation for the 2018 year. And finally, the Council recommend to the next Council. No, that's amended. That's amended.
No, just after the last paragraph.
Oh, it's just a.
I have to read it, though.
As amended.
And finally, that Council recommend to the next Council that it give consideration to including a $24,000 grant to the food bank in the 2019 operating budget as amended.
Thank you.
Councillor Smith?
Thank you, Madam Chair. One quick question to the CEO. Which account is this going to come out of now?
The mayor's.
So, through you, Madam Chair, there is a dedicated account for the food bank, so the portion, most of it will come out of that dedicated account for the food bank, and the smaller amount will come out of the general grants budget.
Thank you. No more questions.
Thank you. Having heard the question, I'll call for the vote. Councillor Boulanger?
In favor?
Deputy Mayor Fulci?
In favor?
Councillor Eagle?
In favor?
Councillor Smith?
In favor.
Mayor Smith?
In favor.
Councillor Stockwell?
Favor.
Chair Bray?
In favor.
Thank you. The motion carries on a vote of 7 in favor, 0 opposed.
The next item that I had pulled was the 2017 second quarter financial report. Because it wasn't attached to the copy of the agenda that I had received. So I wondered if you could either present a verbal here or it could be presented at the next month's meeting. Sorry, Jocelyn?
Do you want me to give you a general overview now?
Is there interest at the table for hearing, or did everybody get it? Was it just me? I know my agenda came to me early, so maybe it wasn't attached.
No, I sent you an email that I put a separate copy in after this, because it wasn't third quarter.
I just haven't been back
Sorry.
to town hall till
I
8
figured
o'clock
that
this
was
morning.
really across.
Yeah.
Madam Chair, I would prefer to have a copy and look at the copy. We don't have anything.
So can we refer this to the next meeting?
Yeah.
Motion to defer. Or defer. Motion to defer. Defer. Defer.
Yeah, I picked my copy up early, it wasn't attached.
Did you have time to read it? Did you have time to read it? I think.
Yeah, I don't, I need that, yes.
By Deputy Mayor Byfolchi, seconded by Councillor Smith. Read item 6.4.1C3, 2017 second quarter financial report. Be it resolved that the coordinated committee defer item 6.4.1C3 to the next coordinated committee of September 14th, 2017.
Thank you. Members of the committee, having heard the question, I'll call for the vote. Councillor Belanger.
In favor?
Deputy Mayor Byfolchi.
In favor?
Councillor Eagle.
In favor?
Councillor Smith.
In favor.
Mayor Smith.
In favor?
Councillor Stockwell.
Favor.
Chair Bray.
In favor.
Thank you. The motion carries on a vote of 7 in favor, 0 opposed.
And the next item to be pulled was accounts. I believe that was Deputy Mayor Byfolchi.
Thank you. I just actually had a question for the treasurer with regard to the $75,000 contribution that the developer was to contribute towards the downtown plan master study. Have we received that money?
Through you, Madam Chair. No, we have not received payment for that invoice. Staff did reach out to Mr. Crow to inquire about payment of the invoice. We have not heard back from Mr. Crow at this time, and we're going to continue to try to reach out with him. And further, staff is having an internal meeting in a few weeks' time to discuss the matter in regards to him.
Okay, and I guess my issue is I think staff was working with them last year and looking at, you know, spreading it over a few months, and then again this year there was a new time frame made again, and we're sitting here and it hasn't been paid. So at the end of the day, I'm looking at it thinking that, you know, are the taxpayers then going to be picking up that 75? So that's why I'm asking the question, but it sounds like you will be speaking with them again and trying to get it.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Stockwell, seconded by Councillor Ego. Resolved that the July 1st to 31st accounts as reviewed by General Government Services section of Coordinating Committee are hereby confirmed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Having heard the question, I'll call for the vote. Councillor Belanger.
In favor?
Deputy Mayor Byfolchi.
In favor?
Councillor Eagle.
In favor?
Councillor Smith.
In favor.
Mayor Smith.
In favor?
Councillor Stockwell.
Favor.
Chair Bray. Thank you. The motion carries on a vote of 7 in favor, 0 opposed.
Okay, other matters, we have none. The date of the next meeting is September 14th, 2017. And we now have a motion to go into closed session. Moved by Councillor Smith, seconded by Deputy Mayor Byfolchi. Resolved that pursuant to Section 239-2-8 B and C of the Municipal Act 2001, as amended, the next portion of the Coordinated Committee of August 17th, 2017, be closed to the public to receive information on personal matters about an identifiable individual and matters relating to proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land.
Thank you. Members of the committee, having heard the question, I'll call for the vote. Councillor Belanger.
In favor?
Deputy Mayor Byfolchi.
In favor?
Councillor Ego.
In favor?
Councillor Smith.
In favor.
Mayor Smith.
In favor?
Councillor Stockwell.
Favor.
Chair Bray. Thank you. The motion carries on a vote of 7 in favor, 0 opposed.
Yeah, that's why you're
everybody here, or we're just start? Okay. So coming out of closed session, Rising report. So Rising report on the two motions discussed in camera. Moved by Mayor Smith, seconded by Deputy Mayor by Fulci. Resolved that Coordinated Committee recommends to Council they confirm the direction given to the Director of Economic Development and Tourism, subject to obtaining further legal advice pertaining to the Main Street property as provided in the closed session report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Having heard the question, I'll call for the vote. Councillor Belanger?
In favor?
Deputy Mayor by Fulci?
In favor?
Councillor Ego?
In favor?
Councillor Smith?
In favor.
Mayor Smith? In favor. Councillor Stockwell?
In favor.
Chair Bray?
In favor.
Thank you. The motion carries on a vote of 7 in favor, 0 opposed.
Second matter discussed, moved by Mayor Smith, seconded by Councillor Smith. Resolved that Coordinated Committee recommends to Council to confirm the recommendation of the CAO as provided in the closed session report and allow the request for a closed session meeting at the next council meeting of August 22nd, 2017 for further legal advice from the town solicitors on personal matters about an identifiable individual, including staffing and expense policies.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Having heard the question, I'll call for the vote. Councillor Belanger?
In favor?
Deputy Mayor by Fulci?
In favor?
Councillor Ego?
In favor?
Councillor Smith? In favor. Mayor Smith?
In favor?
Councillor Stockwell?
In favor.
Chair Bray?
In favor.
Thank you. The motion carries on a vote of 7 in favor, 0 opposed.
Thank you, and this meeting is now adjourned. So we're
Yep.
Why this is just sent to me that we can put on the
you got all choked up
drink
over that?
photocopy of it.
I think I stole your body.
Oh, that's okay.
Just give me a couple minutes, Bill.
So I can draft something up and send it to you, and then maybe we can just get that on letter.